TR. Here we are back shooting our plywood series
Yes,
videos.
sir.
Yeah, good to have you.
Thank you.
You were, as mentioned before in one of the episodes, you were kind enough to take us down to Chehalis and run us through the mill. And I remember that once things kind of got through the dryer, those folks were sorting all those different veneers into different bins, and they had a lot of different numbers or letters on them and so forth.
Right.
I was hoping you could talk about those grades and kind of what their associated characteristics were.
Sure. So what they're doing is they're trying to just maximize their recovery. And by maximizing recovery, I mean you're taking the highest grade and you're separating it out, and then the next highest grade, then the next highest grade, and so on and so forth. So you have basically A, B, C, D, and then C plugged. Those are the prevalent grades. And so when you're making an AC panel, for instance, you're going to have an A face, you're going to have C grade throughout, then you're going to have a C back. So AC, A face, C back, X, exterior glue. That's what those stand for. In a BC panel, you'd have a B face, a C back, exterior glue. In CDX, you have a C face, a D back, and D grade throughout. That's really what's going on there. C plugged now is, or dime C, it could be called. Everyone has different code names for some of these veneers. But that would be a veneer that's just got a lot of little tiny pin knots. And what they can do with that is they'll use it for underlayment. It's kind of a high grade C, because C will allow an occasional 1.5 inches. And what they're looking for is max size inch and mainly little pin knots. Okay. And then they can ream on those out, which is the boat patches, or run it down the putty line or what have you, and fill in any little open voids or cracks.
Okay. Seemed like one of the bins I saw there had the letters MAR on it. What, I'm assuming that was a marine, or?
It's probably a core for the marine grade. So it makes B, so AB marine is A face, B back, and B grade throughout. So what they're doing there is they're building a bin full of core is what they're doing, because they're going to take their A face for the face, and the B is going to be the interior core lines. And if you're doing 3/4, it's a 7-ply panel. So you need a fair amount of that high grade core to go in the interior of that panel.
Okay. With respect to all those panels we saw, or the veneers, I guess, pulling off the rounder down there. Mm-hmm. What, I saw them going to A, C, B. What characteristics? So what makes an A, as far as knot size or splits or things like that? Can you touch on that?
Sure. So the A grade is going to be, when it's actually in a final panel form, it's 18 patch or less. So if you're going to buy an AC panel with a Doug fir face, it can have 18 boat patches or less. If you're making a siding panel, 30318, it'll have an A face on it. If you're making a 3036 panel, it's going to have 6 patches on it, which is even a higher grade than just A. It's another notch up. But what they're doing is they're separating A face, which is 18 defects or less. What they think they can get, that done when they get it to the next stage of production. B would be one step down from that, where it's unlimited patches. So what they're saying there is the grader is thinking, if I ran this through the Raymond machine and just boat patched, 25, 35 times, and then ran it through the putty line, would this make a B face? Okay, that's going in that tray. And then if it's a series, just a veneer that is very typical of once you get into the interior of the log, where there's unlimited 1-inch knots sitting on it, that's C. That's C grade.
Okay.
But if it goes and it has over 1.5 inches as an average and occasional 2 or 2.5, that's D grade. So that's going to go into D. The basic 1-inch tight knot kind of, that's C grade, and it can vary a bit. And then there'll be a grade, if the mill decides to pull this, there'll be a C plugged grade, which is, it can have tight, secure knots, no dead knots. So dead knots are like black, but the live knots, they'll stay put once you get it in production, once you're going, lay up and press. And so they'll have a C plugged grade. That's very typical of underlayment face.
Okay. A question I had just from the forest level, I know you spent time out there, but for a plywood mill versus some of your lumber mills, how is a plywood log, is it graded differently than something that's going to make 2x4s or 2x8s?
Well, in theory, yes, it is. But in reality, I mean, you're going to take what you can and make what you can. I remember we had the mill I was working at, coal peelers coming in. Now, a coal peeler is a big old rotten log, basically, that has a big pitch pocket in the middle of it. Okay. And you'd peel it real carefully for a little bit and try and get all that high-grade veneer off the outside of it before it spun out and just disintegrated and went in the chipper. Okay. So, you know, you're going to do what you can to just make veneer out of whatever comes to your mill. But yes, there's peeler logs, that's a grade. Peeler 1, peeler 2, that's a grade. It's kind of...
Or maybe if a log has a lot of taper, would it go to a lumber mill versus a plywood mill?
Not necessarily.
That doesn't matter because of that XY. Okay.
No.
Okay.
No, that Scribner's scale is how you measure volume on logs. And you measure it by the small end, not the big end. So the more taper that you have, the higher your recovery is.
If you're good at that,
because you're getting more wood out of that log. And that's the beauty of the second growth log, is there's a lot of taper. You know, those big pipes that used to grow, you know, years ago, that's not all the logs that are coming into the mills anymore. Okay. We're getting a lot of second growth at this point in the game.
Gotcha. You may have answered this in a previous episode, but one of the questions I had is, are there certain wood species that are synonymous with certain products? Or, as you mentioned, is it really, I mean, fir is the thing and it makes...
Well, for
90%
instance,
of the stuff.
Sure.
Other than some of the hardwood phase.
Right. Well, in like marine grade, it's all got to be Doug fir or larch. It's got to be a group 1 species. So the main species that we're talking about here are group 1 and group 2. Group 1 is Doug fir and larch. Group 2 is hemlock, ponderosa pine. It's a subspecies to Doug fir. Mm-hmm. So what you're trying to do is capture all that, you know, you're separating Doug fir from hem fir when you're in the mill. You're running it separate. You're not running it all together. Because if you're going to make a struck 1 panel or a marine grade panel, you've got to have all Doug fir. So you can't have these veneers interspersed. It doesn't work. And you'll try and if you dry hem fir at the same rate with the Doug fir, typically it's going to come out with a red stripe on it, which means this piece of veneer came out of the dryer wet and it needs to go through and get dried again.
You know, TR, one thing I found myself wondering about as I was walking through the mill, watching them sort off the rounder there.
Yeah.
You know, it's not going super fast, but it was going pretty fast. So what is basically the accuracy level of their decisions in those bins?
Right. And it's kind of at the grader's discretion too, right? So, you know, you want to make sure you have a good grader in place. But to answer your question, they're shooting for the moon in a lot of situations. So they think they can get the panel to A grade, they do. And remember, it's going to another grading process after this and after this. So there's 2 more grading processes after that round table. One, it goes to the Raymond machine where they're going to try and patch it up and make it as high a grade as they can, like we've chatted about in previous sequences here.
Yeah.
But once it's coming out the sander, like the final stage, you're looking at, because anything with AB is going to go through a sander. It's going to be a sanded panel.
Yeah.
And so there's a grader there, and if he's looking down and it's supposed to be AC, and he's seeing, 24 patches, doink, that goes in a different bin, and that's BC. And let's say he's got a full-on, the face is folded over and went through the press, with a face folded over or something like that. We've seen that before.
Yeah.
Or you can see something that got underneath the veneer and is, it's sanded through a little bit or something. Okay, that's going into the shop bin. So there's sanded shop. We do a product at Dunn Lumber for you folks. We have for years. You've carried it for decades, siding shop. Kind of hard to get. You don't get a lot of it because they don't make a lot of defective product.
They're trying not to, right?
They try not to, exactly. But it's good wood. And, for sheds or barns, or if you just need a piece to cut up a little bit to do a repair, it's a cheap alternative to, the on-grade panel. So anyway, that's what they're always looking to make sure that everything, by the time it's packaged up, ready to get on a truck and go out, it's of the utmost quality. But at the round table, you're kind of shooting to get it as high a grade as you can.
That totally makes sense. Okay. So A veneer, 18 patches or less.
Correct.
B unlimited, but you can't have those other defects. Shop, any kind of warranty on that, or is it all bets are off if you're buying a shop grade?
Shop is an 85% usable panel, which means, like, if this table was a piece of plywood, you could cut it off right here, and if that's all good, you got nothing to say.
And if I take my worm drive and I cut it in half and it blows, it's all
You got nothing to say. Yeah.
We'll probably help you out at Dunn Lumber, but TR's not going to help me out.
Well, I'm not saying that. You know that.
Yeah, I love it. Another great episode, man.
Thank you, Jim.
Appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank
you bet.